Right. Okay. So, shall we start? Okay. Go. Hey, Dean.
Hey Konrad, how are you?
All right.
Konrad, how are you?
All right. How you doing, man?
I'm very well, thank you.
So, welcome to our second podcast.
Yeah, my name is Dean Cottiel,
I'm Konrad van Staden.
and welcome to the second episode of the As Above, So Below podcast.
So, this week we're talking about something that I thought Dean might not know much about.
It's true.
Faith.
We've had a few good laughs about trying to figure out how to even start this conversation, and if you're diving into this being your first episode, last week we started with episode 1, went into a little bit about what it means to be human, a little bit of the human soul, the human experience, and the response has been amazing online. So for those of you who are listening for the second time, really thank you so much for joining us on YouTube, Spotify, as well as on Apple. Please hit the subscribe button on YouTube, and it will be really great to continue this journey with you.
Absolutely. We got a lot of feedback from all quarters, which I want to say thank you about. I made a couple of notes here what a few people have said, and so we'll try and work that into
absolutely.
conversation as we go.
Yeah, it's really great. I think faith is something that's quite close to home for both of us. But I think to refer to your joke earlier, within the Christian faith, for the lack of a better word, Christianity is almost synonymous with this idea of what it means to have faith, what it means to be a community of faith. And I thought, as a fundamental, as a basic, radical place to start, and I mean radical in the sense of, at the root of it all, what does it mean to have faith? We all actually have faith. We all have faith in something. I have faith in this chair that it is going to hold me up when I sit down. I don't even think about it before I sit down,
Yeah.
I have faith in my car that it will start every morning. Every morning I wake up and I start my car without even thinking. I have faith that my car will start.
Yeah.
What happens then, though, sometimes is when my car begins to give me issues, doubt creeps in. And I begin to doubt whether the car is going to start because there might be a carburetor issue or there might be a battery issue. Then all of a sudden I start to put in other processes that might need to kick in for me to kickstart that engine. We all have faith in something.
I think it's interesting what you say, because obviously we have this common area of faith, and people wouldn't commonly think that faith is really part of the psychotherapy field. But it's a massively important area. And just to go back to what you said, we all have faith in something. And what is faith? So I think, for me, just to start there, I think thinking about what you're saying, faith is traditionally considered in the Western world the monotheistic God. It's faith in God.
Yeah.
And we really do require to have faith in a lot of things. I'm thinking about here in South Africa, we're supposed to have faith in our government, or faith in maybe another political party. I have faith in my spouse, faith in my car, faith in my body. But we seem to use that so openly. And I really wanted to actually delve into, I was thinking, you're making me think here about what is the difference between faith. one of the comments we had on Instagram today was something about hope, and hope and faith isn't quite the same thing, is it?
Yeah.
If you think about that, faith in God is the traditional way that we think about it. So it's faith in something that we can't really see.
Yeah.
It's faith in the mystery.
Yeah.
And I think that's what it's about.
You're getting close now. You're going to start quoting scripture here.
For those
of us who are familiar with Hebrews, that's the first one that comes to mind for a lot of us. Is faith as being certain of those things that we cannot see, and certain of that hope, things that are hoped for. So there's an element of stuff that is unseen, and there is an element of being sure of the things that we hope for and hope in. So from a Christian perspective, we are quite, that mystery that you speak about, I think, is something that we don't bring up often, because I believe that the reality of faith is removed from what it means to be certain about stuff. And that mystery that we talk about almost creates a moment of, well, I'm not sure, actually. And I think that the Christian church, what we've done so often, is try to give certainty around one-liners, or certainty around what it means to have faith in something, but we stay away from what it means to be open to any kind of doubt. And so the moment we begin to touch on what it means to have doubts or uncertainties, or I'm not really sure, I think we start to panic a little bit.
Thinking about what you're saying here, and I like the fact that now a couple of times you've brought in the word doubt, and I really like that, because I think that whenever there is, and I'm still stuck on this thing about what is faith, and if we're going to think about anything that produces doubt, then we need faith to bridge that. We need faith to get to the other side. And I'm thinking here, just bringing it to a broader context, really faith is part of everyday life. It infuses every aspect of life. In order to live, in order for life to become, you need to have faith. I think how many people go through the loss of a child, the loss of a loved one. We need to have faith in nature. We've lost faith. We've lost faith in structures. We've lost faith in families. Many people have lost faith in the church.
So the car just didn't start for so many times.
Our
expectations of what we thought should or shouldn't happen, all of a sudden, just doesn't add up.
So is faith not something that goes hand in hand with doubt? That you need to doubt in order to develop faith. You have to place yourself in that precarious situation that allows you to doubt, to feel some sense of, so doubt for me goes in the direction of there's a doubling there, there's a parallel, there's an opposing paradox. And if you can hold that and you can start to play with that, then, going back to it, that's what life is about. If you don't make life, we don't have faith in life, then it goes back to something that dies. So faith and no faith seems to be something that we're dabbling with the whole time. And we what you were saying is that we need to, or a lot of people are trying to hold onto some structure of faith and not open themselves up to doubt. And if I come from my tradition, I think the moment that we start to open that up, and I think psychotherapy or any kind of personal growth process is about opening up the mystery of that doubt and having faith and no faith, death and life that operate cyclically together.
Because you see, faith pushes us to a place where we don't have the answer. I don't have within myself the extra bits and pieces to get to the other side of this river. And so I need faith to get me beyond that thing. I'm reminded of a story where a centurion comes to Jesus, a Roman soldier in Matthew 8. And this Roman soldier says, Jesus, heal my daughter. She is at home. I don't have the answers. I don't have the medicine. There is no way for me to fix this thing in and of myself. I am unable to. And it's in that moment that Jesus goes, your faith has healed your daughter. Jesus actually, funny moment, goes, well, let's go to your daughter. And the Roman soldier's like, nah, man, you don't even have to, just, you can stay here. So Jesus isn't even in the room, and the faith of that man heals his daughter. So faith bridges the gap of what we are unable to do for ourselves in that moment. So from a Christian perspective, if we were to take a step back, there is a moment where healing happens, where faith heals a person. Now, from a Christian perspective, and if we involve Jesus more and more, we also read that in the scriptures that without faith it is impossible to please God. So if we were to go back to what is faith, faith for me is my dad's going to come through. Now, if I think about myself as a dad who has two kids who has to put dinner on the table without us changing gears too much here, my kids don't second guess whether there's going to be dinner tonight. As a dad, I'm quite well aware of the implications of what it means to feed my kids tonight. So they live by faith. They might not have the language for it. They might not have the structure in their minds to go, I wonder if mom and dad are going to make dinner tonight. No, they live in this place of, I have everything I need because my dad bridges the gap.
You bring in a very important thing. I think we so often in the religious experience, what I've found with people is that they jump ahead. Faith just is. And I think there's a separation between faith and belief there very often. But there's also this sense of, I'm trying to think here what you're saying, what is faith? And faith is a very, very personal, fragmented experience. It's fragmenting because in the fragmentation of what we experience as what we can trust, what we can hold in a concrete level. And I think that we go through processes, and I think the spiritual growth that we go through, the emotional growth, the psychological growth that we go through, requires periods of immense faith, where there's a complete fragmentation experience very often. And it's in the openings of the self. It's when the self opens up, that's where we have an opportunity to go into the experience of faith. So it's as if life opens up possibilities to create faith.
Yeah.
That's what I find so amazing. It's, people often, and I don't know what your experience of it is. Interesting, I think so many people struggle because so many bad things are happening in the world, and then they lose faith. And I think that's only the beginning of the process. I like it when that happens. It's a terrible experience. It's a terrible, terrible experience. But that is the opportunity that when we lose our faith, in the concrete, in the predictability, in the organized structures, that's when there's a potential that opens up.
Is that a potential for a rebuilding? Is that the world saying the structures that you thought would get you further they're not going to work anymore? You're going to need a new thing to get past this level, for the lack of a better word.
Yeah, it's an interesting thing because I think we've got to be very careful. I see the way you use the word, but I think we've got to be so careful when we use the word rebuilding because I think nostalgia is a massive thing these days. You know, the good old days,
Yeah.
everybody wants to go back there.
Yeah.
But that's going backwards.
Yeah.
It's not rebuilding as in breaking down and then rebuilding. You know, that's the thing for me. You know, I have the immense privilege, as I'm sure you've had, to sit next to people as they grow and go through an immense spiritual and psychological process.
Yeah.
And it's in those moments where there's that immense fragmentation and there's nothing left. There's a burning down. It's like a burnout of everything.
Yeah.
That you hold fast.
Yeah.
And you wait.
Yeah. Sure.
And then you get through that process. And you need people there with you to have faith with you.
Yeah.
Community, a collective. And then you get to the other side, and suddenly that's where the rebuilding takes place. It's like something starts to crystallize that's new.
Yeah, you're touching on two things for me. I think the one is light and dark, and the other one is the community. And I'll try and remember both of them now as I try and respond. You know, I have faith that the sun's going to rise. But in the darkness of midnight, and everything around me is dark, it's very hard to believe that the sun's going to come up. Don't know when it's going to come up. You know, I think life and all of its complexities doesn't follow the rules of, well, 2 more hours. Like life doesn't play by those rules.
Pain, eh?
Jesus himself on the cross, you know, quotes David in the Psalms, my God, why have you forsaken me? And it's in that moment that the sky, the clouds fall dark. The earth goes dark. And it's in that moment, you know, without us quoting things like dark night of the soul, going into this 36-hour period where the disciples, Mary, Jesus' mother, got no idea what's going on. Everybody's almost lost faith. Don't actually know what's happening. What has happened to Jesus? He's dead. Is this the end of it all? Where do we go from here? What happened? Some of his disciples even go back to their day jobs. They're like, well, it was a fun ride, I guess. And Peter and James and John go back to fishing. They just carry on going back to what they were doing before they encountered Jesus. So they almost don't even know where to go because it's still this darkness. They're not sure if the sun's coming up. But as somebody who loves travel, as somebody who loves chasing sunrises and sunsets, it is one of the most beautiful things. And if we hang on to this metaphor, to be in darkness and to see the sun start coming. And that is where this awakening begins to happen. That I think when light begins to shine on the things that were once dark, I think faith happens. And I think what we need to kind of connect back to your community thing is I need other people around me to tell me, don't worry, the sun will rise.
Dean, I'm wondering there, you're touching on something else. I just want to go back a step. You said it, but I think it's such a beautiful metaphor. The whole world goes dark. Jesus' crucifixion, the whole world goes dark. It has to go dark. And then people go back, and you said a very important thing there, that they go back to their day jobs. They want to go back. And I'm thinking, I know we're jumping around. It's
the nostalgia that you were talking about.
Well, I'm thinking that how do you get through? How do you get through? You know, there's so many people that go and they hide into a corner, they fall apart. But the falling apart process is such an important thing inside. But it's maybe we can think about it as it's important to carry on with your day job. It's important to carry on doing what you're doing, but not losing faith. And it's difficult.
Sure.
I know it's maybe thinking of what do we need to do to get through these periods. And I think it's, as a psychologist, I look at people and they go through that period. The transformation happens in that, the dark night of the soul. And it's in those moments when you go back to the basic things, I'd hate to go back and say, no, okay, it's the sleep hygiene, it's the little things, but it's not really that. It's holding on to the little things that remind you. And I very often wonder, because it brings up another thing for me. How do we create faith? Is faith just a natural thing that we're supposed to have? Because I often hear that from a lot of Christians. They talk about, you just got to have faith. Just have faith, man. And if you don't have it, well, then sorry, you're not part of us.
You're not really
You're not sure.
Yeah.
How do we create it?
Yeah. And people, I think we've so often, I cringed as you said that, because I think we've harmed so many people by just saying, well, sorry, man, you just didn't have enough faith for that healing to take place. Well, you didn't have enough faith for that prayer. Why did I lose my job? Didn't have enough faith. And I think the Western Evangelical Church has a lot to say sorry for. I know I'm going to get in trouble here and people are going to email me.
That's why we're here.
We've messed it up, man. And we've blamed and heaped heavy burdens on people by saying, well, you just didn't have enough faith. Because the scriptures don't say that. The nuances of Jesus' relationship with people and what it meant for certain people to have faith and certain people for there to be grey in the middle of it all, we see the mystery exists there. And what does it mean to have faith? I'm reminded, as you were talking about Richard Rohr, who talks about order, these three boxes that exist in our lives. There is order, and then there is disorder, and then there is reorder. And your life is full of order, but then disorder takes place. This darkness takes place. The shuffle takes place. And then I need to reorder some things.
I think, there's a lot of people that watched the first podcast, and we both got a lot of feedback. And there was something amazing for me in a lot of the feedback that we got, that there was almost this anticipation that wow, you guys are talking about something here that in some sense is interesting, but it's giving us some kind of hope. And I'm wondering if what you're bringing up here is not a very important thing, that when hope is lost, when faith is lost, when we break down and we don't have any more faith, we seem to think in the world that we live in that it's at that moment that we are lost. That's the end of the road. And we somehow try to regather. And that's where the nostalgia comes in. We go back to the things we knew. It's exactly there where I think we have to find a way to say, okay, we break through. That's where we need to be. We need to actually get to that place of lost faith.
I think we see those images in the Gospels. I think we see those moments where Jesus is crucified and buried, and we don't know what's happening. Don't know where to from here. This is the end. It's darkness. We don't know how do we recover this thing. But if we could be so bold, if we could be so brave as to say it's in that moment that resurrection knocks on the door. Is there a way for new life here? Is there a way for a new thing? Is there a way from all the ashes, of all of the ashes, could there be a phoenix that comes out of this thing?
Okay, I've got to stop you there, right? Because you're supposed to be the priest and I'm supposed to be the therapist. And any of my Jungian colleagues that are going to be watching now are going to be watching in great glee at the metaphors you're using. That's fantastic. Because that's exactly it. I'm getting goosebumps as you mentioned that. Because, and I'm sorry I'm interrupting. This is it, isn't it? It's in the moment that we go through the dark night of the soul. We go through the valley of the shadow of death. And we need to hold on to that very tenuous space of faith. But faith lost is faith found.
Yeah.
Where there is death, there is life.
Yeah.
Where there's a darkness at midnight, there's a sun on the other side of the earth.
Every blessing comes with a set of curses, yeah?
We wait for and we hold the promise of that paradox
Yeah.
and the promise of the resurrection.
Yeah. Yeah.
The ashes have to be there. You can't have embers left. You have to burn down completely. And then the resurrection will only happen
Goodness
there.
gracious. Yeah. I started my journey in the Methodist Church as a 19-year-old kid who wanted to become a Methodist minister. Was kind of titled the blue-eyed boy, long blonde hair, and didn't have a beard back then, but that was the dream,
Wow, man.
And then you kind of hit a wall at the Methodist Church, and it feels like you kind of lose everything. And I did. I didn't become a minister. I didn't follow through. That wasn't the thing. Then kind of connected with one or two other churches, and that also didn't go according to plan. Recently, if I may repeat myself, didn't really go according to plan, and you feel like the bottom comes out, and you haven't got anything left. The world gives way, and you don't have what appears to be anything to stand on. But the analogies and the metaphors that we're using now, it's in those ashes. What you said there's no embers left. It is ash. And if you're proudly South African, I think you've stood around a braai long enough to know the next morning that ash, you're not making anything from that.
Yeah.
But there is something that we're talking about now that transcends what we see there. And I'm reminded of the imagery of any Harry Potter fans out there. When Dumbledore's bird dies
I remember
in
that.
front of Harry, it's just gone. It's just ash. But this phoenix rises out of the ashes, a new thing. Parts of the old stuff was burnt and gone, and there is a whole new thing that takes place. Don't know why I'm reminded of Odysseus right now, and the Odyssey. And he is a shipfarer, he is an ocean captain. And he carries in the final 2 chapters of the book, he carries his oar with him till he comes to the end of his journey after leaving home again. And he carries his oar. I hope I'm not butchering this. Somebody help us if we're doing this, if I can remember this correctly.
One of my favorite stories.
And the land dweller who meets him thinks his oar is a wheat, what do you call it?
Yeah, the sickles.
That separates the wheat from the chaff. So something that was used for the ocean is now a completely different thing. But what Odysseus has to do is hit that thing into the ground and leave it behind. What was used for one thing is now used for another thing. His life has now taken a whole new journey of what I was doing, I'm no longer doing. What was helping me is no longer going to help me. There's a whole new thing that takes place in his life. This leaving home again, this resurrection that almost happens in him is a brand new thing. And the Christian church, I think we've done and quoted many, many times in the book of Isaiah, God says, see, I'm doing a new thing. Rivers in the wasteland. Rivers in the desert. That takes a great deal of faith.
Huge amount.
To go, I'm going to step into the unknown here.
There's one image of Odysseus jumping over. We have to jump over. And I'm reminded of what you said just now, when you said you felt like the bottom falls out.
Mm.
There's a very well-known, one of my favorite psychoanalysts, Michael Eigen, that wrote a book, The Psychotic Core, which just kind of tells you what it's about. You know, it's really in there, the deep depths of the soul. And he talks about how there's moments when you're sitting with somebody over a period of time through this process, and they're not letting go, but they're asking the question. But if I drop and if I lose this footing, if the bottom is gone, then there's nothing, and I free fall forever. I'm in hell. And he says to them, not directly, of course, but through the process, let go, I'll be there. And they're dropping. And then they discover that there is something. And I think that's what we're talking about here, is that how do you develop faith without having some sense of, and I think that's why we have so many myths and stories, and why the Bible is filled with all of these stories, where faith is a major process for all of us to go through. We have to trust in that the bottom falls out, and there is something there to catch us. And once you do that, and once you've done that once, it's kind of like having your kid, and they don't want to jump off a cupboard or something, and you catch them. And it's in that moment where it's such a tenuous moment, and everybody, without recognizing it, I saw it's just a moment, and you're scared and all that. But at the same time, at a completely different level, there's something in you that recognizes this incredibly important moment for this child and for you, that you're passing on the faith to your son.
What do you think, if I may use and try and quote, paraphrasing there what you said there, that there is something? How do you think we label that something, capital S something, that catches us?
Capital S self, capital S something.
Because when the bottom does fall out and you have nothing left, without going back to last week, we spoke a bit about identity, we spoke a bit about the human experience. When the bottom does give way and you don't have anything left, I'm reminded of one of the oldest texts in the scriptures of Job, where everything does get ripped from under him. And there is 10, 20, 30 chapters worth of his friends arguing with God and arguing with Job. And then right at the end, everything is restored. And this moment of God goes, but Job, where were you when I put the stars in the sky? Where were you when I set the earth in motion? Where were you when I filled the fields with the beasts? And where were you when there's this moment of everything does give way for Job.
So I'm interested in what you say. I was just chuckling because somebody gave us feedback from last week and said, they'd like to hear about Job. Let's talk about Job. So that was quite funny. And it's such an important story, right? I mean, there's volumes written in psychology about Job. But anyway, to get back to what is that? And I'm going to say something now and then we'll kind of pull back from there. But I think faith assures us a platform of experience where eternity and time intersect. And that gives us a direction and an experience to use the sense of transcendence, the feeling of transcendence, the experience of that there is something here that transforms us and transcends all of this. And what is that? And I think we're not going to give our game away in just one podcast. We're going to stretch this out. We've got a lot to talk about and flesh out. But I think one of the things is that there's a sense of something which in our ego consciousness in our day-to-day experience and what we create in the world around us, that there's something of an illusion to us. And we live this, and the world and advertising, etc., is telling us, but this is the life, keep living it.
Yeah.
And if you're not successful, just become a remastered version of yourself. Do another course, go back, get remarried, get another this, another that. Do better. And I think that's the problem here. And that's I think it's something fundamental that we are talking about today, is about, we're not talking about having faith as in a strengthening of the ego, as it's understood in Jungian language, but it's a moving and a leaning into something so that we can get to the authentic self, the true self, the capital S self, as Jung called it. And that is a deeply, deeply spiritual, soulful experience of a part of ourselves where these other parts that start to fragment, they open the way for us to have a foothold into this.
Yeah.
And I can understand why people are scared of it.
Mm.
It's deeply anxious. And,
Frightening.
yeah.
When I read in the scriptures that people like Paul use words like the flesh, I often like to kind of change that word with the ego to jump onto what you were saying there. When the ego wants to get involved, the ego doesn't like it when I have to bend a knee. The ego doesn't like it when the bottom falls out. The ego doesn't like it when I don't have the answers to this thing. So when I dive into what it means to be authentically myself, or when it means I need to go into who I am, that capital S self that you were talking about there, there is a moment where everything falls quiet. And actually go, who am I in this place? Truly. And it is when Paul uses words like the Christ is in you, and the Christ is in each of us, that I think that authentic true self begins to want to come alive. And I think it's, from a Christian perspective, if I may, that it is in that moment that I'm able to have faith. That even when the bottom falls out, I am still me.
So it is. So it is in any spiritual, psychological growth process. That at that tenuous moment, when you're going through something and you lose faith, you lose the faith you've had, and there's an intuition that lies at the end of that. That is such a split-second membrane, miniature moment where suddenly something rises or comes to you and it meets you. In the moment of the greatest despair, it is there. And
it's a kid jumping off the cupboard.
It's a kid jumping off the cupboard. And you know,
is that a leap of faith? I mean, is that what you're saying? I mean, is it? What's the alternative?
I think it was Kierkegaard that actually coined that phrase in a different way. And it is a leap of faith. It is a moment that it's such a beautiful moment, isn't it? Because we experience it in so many different ways every single day.
Yeah.
I'm reminded of how many people stop the journey of therapy halfway. It's too painful. How many people struggle to hold on to the perseverance, the courage, the faith, to keep it? It's painful.
It's hard work, huh? I mean, without using I use the word work carefully, sensitively. That inward process. I mean, for me, it makes me wonder how, and it makes me realize more how important it is to have other people of faith around you. And again, I say of people of faith.
Yeah, listen, I'm not going to switch chairs here with you now, but wherever two or more gather in my name,
Yeah.
and I think that's what we're talking about here today. And I think that this, I felt the immensity of today's discussion. There's a kind of a heavy responsibility that I feel in discussing this issue of faith, because I think there's such an importance of what this issue means for us, and how tenuous it is in our society.
Yeah.
Because relationships are broken in maintaining the faith for each other. There are people leaving this country, there are people leaving marriages, there are people leaving families, there are people checking out of life because of this loss of faith. And we're talking about a topic here, but we're taking people to the brink of it to say, but it lies beyond that point where you've lost the faith.
Yeah.
And isn't that just so? And I feel the immensity of this because it's such an important thing that saves people. It saves your soul. Man.
Yeah, I mean, without diving too much into what's popular at the moment and what's a kind of buzzword at the moment, but deconstruction seems to be the buzzword within Christian circles at the moment, and so much of the Western church going through this deconstruction. And I wonder, I've just had what we've been talking about has just given me a little bit of language now, is what if that deconstruction is merely just a loss of faith in the structures that were supposed to, what was never actually supposed to in the first place hold our faith? We were never supposed to put our faith in a church organization.
You're not supposed to put your faith in ego. You're not supposed to put your faith in the houses and the cars that we drive and the jobs that we have. And of course, when we do that, then that is so tenuous that people lose their faith. They walk out of churches and say, well, because that church failed us, we've lost faith completely. Yeah. Because I've lost my job, I fall into a deep depression and I never recover again. And I guess that's what we're saying. There is something we've put our faith in, and we're pointing the way here today, and we're talking about where do you? And it seems to be that it's not a place. It's a knowingness, it's an intuition, it's an experience of intuition and faith meeting each other, and a knowingness.
Dare I say it's a relationship?
It's a relationship, yeah.
Yeah.
Well, I think to come back to what you said just now, and it's an important thing for people, because I think what I want to ask here, and I think people will be asking is, okay, that's great, but geez, it's a scary place, that, man. And what do I do? Where do I go? How do I deal with it?
Yeah.
And I think it's important that, like a father that catches his son or daughter jumping off, and then there's a belief, and that's the basis of the faith that develops. It's the same. It's in relationship. I can, as a therapist, there's an idea that I can only take people to places where I've been before.
Yeah.
And I think it's the same.
Sure.
We've got to go to places. We've got to stand with people in relationship and take them through these things.
Yeah. One of the most amazing things for me as we wrap this up, and I think we'll continue some more next week, one of the most amazing things for me was my friend Craig and I did the Faroe Islands in 2015, and then we went back in 2017 with some more friends. And there was this moment where we were almost the guides, the tour guides for this one hike that we were doing, because Craig and I had done that. And we could stand in the road and go, guys, we're going there. We know the way. This is going to be the greatest hike you've ever done in your life. Like, gear up.
Yeah.
And I wonder if part of what we've lost in society, in our culture, in our community, in our call it what you will, in our families, dare I even say it, is we have lost the elders who are saying, we're going up there, and it is going to be the best hike of your life. We haven't got people who are giving us roadmaps or road signs along the way to go, you're on the right track. You actually need the bottom to fall out. And dare I say it, you need the bottom to fall out as soon as possible.
Well, I think we're lucky. We're human beings, and I think we've got roadmaps inside of us. We kind of intuitively know this.
Sure.
And we have to get beyond the idea in society that the anxiety that we feel is a bad thing, and we need to lean into it. Leaning into it means that we move towards that faith, and we lean in towards that intuition and the mystery, and we discover. And there's literature is full of this. The Bible is full of this. There's stories, and we carry it among the elders. And I think that's what we need to do. You're quite right. We maybe need to sit around a couple of fires.
Yeah. I think that's episode 2.
I guess so.
We'll carry on next week. Konrad, always a pleasure. Always a pleasure sitting with you and sipping on a whiskey and I think talking about life and love and everything else in between.
Absolutely.
Yeah, I hope I may speak on behalf of both of us. We're incredibly grateful for the community that's coming along on this journey. We look forward to the next 100 episodes. We'd love for you to join us on Instagram, on Twitter, as well as on Facebook. And we would love for you to subscribe to our YouTube channel. So please stay tuned for another episode next week. But from me, Dean Cottill.
And from me, Konrad van Staden.
We'll chat to you soon.
See you soon. See you next week.